All right, everyone, thank you for coming, and thank you for putting up with that. Our normal AV guy will be back next month, so you won't have to put up with me doing this anymore. And we apologize for the late start. Hopefully everyone got a chance to have a little sandwich there or something like that. So for those of you who don't know, I know I say this every time, and so far no one's walked out, but you're at a JavaScript meetup, so stick around if you want to learn JavaScript, or be really confused, I guess, if you don't. I'm not sure. We like to start with quick introductions, and basically the idea here is that the JavaScript meetup, it's all about connecting people, connecting a community. And so for being the new year, we thought we would start with kind of questions about what you want to stop doing and what you want to start doing in 2018. So I'll kick it off. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm a JavaScript developer and a Ruby developer too. And one of the things I'm going to start doing is being better about testing in more browsers. I think browser choice is really important. And so I think that's one thing I'm going to do. And in terms of what I'll stop doing, I think I will stop writing so many things that don't have unit tests, because every time I don't write unit tests, I get in trouble. So probably just, more testing. Okay, and I will grab some mics. We'll just pass them around, and you guys can do order. Okay, we got one right there. Why don't you pick it up?
All right. I don't know what I'm stopped doing, but I know what I'm going to do. It's charging clients more.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Dan Nelson, and I'm going to stop working as an employee and start consulting instead. So that's me.
My name is Shane. I'm going to try to start reading more books. I don't read enough, so and for stop, I don't know. Maybe get better in shape a bit.
Hi, my name is Zach. I'm going to start reading more like newsletters and stuff about Ember.
My name is Ivan, and also this year I would like to start reading more books, both in like programming stuff, but also like people skills.
Great.
Hi, my name is Yuan. I will stop complaining in 2018. I will start more community work in this year as well.
Great.
My name is Josh, and I guess I'll stop watching too much YouTube videos and I'll start trying to read some stuff.
Good answer.
Hello, I'm Sean. I'm going to stop answering questions which are the direct inverse of each other. And I'm going to start not answering questions that are directly inverse of each other.
Nice answer.
I'm Steve. I'm a JavaScript developer as well. I'm going to start participating more in code reviews and stop letting things slide for the sake of getting features out.
It's a hard one.
Hi, I'm John. I'm more of a DevOps guy than a developer, so I tend to wear a lot of hats. So I think I'm going to start doing more formal learning about some of the things that I'm working with, and stop just forging ahead without learning anything about anything.
Great.
Hey, my name's Simon. I'm going to start learning to very detail like some front-end custom frameworks and stop staying up till 2 in the morning doing stuff.
My name is Ben. I'm going to start taking more pen and paper notes again, shifting back from digital notes to physical notes. And I'm going to stop getting so worked up reading so much Trump news.
My name's Casey. I'm going to stop starting hobby projects and then abandoning them and start actually finishing something.
I am Dan Fan, and I want to stop not testing IE, even though I hate IE in development. And I want it to die horribly, but I should care about IE. And I want to start learning more detailed about concepts in programming or JavaScript details or anything.
Hey, I'm Kent. I'm going to stop feature bloat and start learning like a bit more like theoretical stuff and maybe do some more MOOCs.
I'm Riley. I'm gonna stop jumping between different frameworks a bunch instead of learning any of them fully. And I'm gonna try to start getting everyone I work with kind of up to speed on proper code practices and stuff like that.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm going to try to start getting really organized about the business side of being a freelancer and being proactive and up to date about all my accounting and stuff. And I'm going to stop getting sucked into projects that don't pay but take all my time.
Happens.
Roberto, not really JavaScript developer, but I understand some of it, so I want to start to be a little bit more organized in some of the projects, so I understand a little bit more about the technologies and how to do that. And stop not sleeping at night, just randomly looking at stuff online.
Yeah.
I'm Carrie, I'm a JavaScript developer, and I'm gonna stop pushing tickets through, and then I'm gonna start reading more.
Great.
I'm Kevin McKee. I'm just getting back into programming after a couple of years away here. I've been here before. I'm kind of coming to this from the direction of data science and hitting HTML5 and rediscovering JavaScript. And what am I going to start? I'm going to start. Well, I need a project to work on for my data science stuff, so I'm going to stop. I think the Trump stuff. I think I should probably stop. Yeah. That stuff. It's a waste of time. So.
Great. Okay, great. Did we get everybody? Looks like we got everyone. All right. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I noticed a few new faces here. Who's maybe this is their first time or their first time in a while? Maybe just put your hand up. All right. Okay. So I'm going to assume everyone else has been here before or recently. So it's your job to make everyone new feel welcome and help them out here a bit. So say hello if you happen to bump into them, I guess. There is free Wi-Fi here, and the password did change last month. So if you don't have it on your phone or you need it for your laptop, it's Startup Edmonton Guest, and it's Warehouse 12 with a capital W. So I'll leave that. We normally have it on a chalkboard when we're in the other room. Oh. Right here. There we go. Great. Okay. And next meetup, February 1st. So if you are going to come to that one, make sure you look at your calendar for February before February starts, or else you'll miss it. We're going to be talking, I think actually I didn't update this slide. We're going to be talking about Web Worker and JavaScript Event Loop. We're going to be bumping to March. So we're looking for one more talk too. So if you have something interesting to talk about, we're always looking for talks on interesting things like GraphQL. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I would love to know more about that for sure, Mike, personally. So why don't we connect about that after? All right. Another thing too is that we're trying to kind of emphasize that this is a welcoming environment for everyone. So we have a code of conduct. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically just be decent with people and expect them to be decent with you, and we will do our best to support you if any issues come up. If you want, you can read the whole thing on our website. We have a couple talks tonight. We have Mikael up with Vulkan.js. It's an awesome framework from the Meteor guys. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, okay.
But it's actually like the whole community behind this whole year.
All right. Okay, I won't make you do your whole talk right now, but I'm sure we'll know all about it by the time it's over. And then we also have Casey up talking about unit testing, which is something that I would want to do more of. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. So we're also, for the discussion, given some things that happened over the last couple of days, I thought security would be a timely thing to talk about. I also have some things that we could do about talking about prototyping, which goes kind of in line with some of the stuff that Michael will be talking about too. So just a show of hands, who wants to talk about security? Okay, a couple hands. And who wants to talk about prototyping? Okay, you guys aren't helping me here. It's about even. Okay, why don't we talk about security, because we haven't talked about it in a while. And we have talked about kind of some bootstrapping stuff recently. Yeah, well, we'll see. Maybe we'll just discover we all don't know anything about security. But I'll see if I'll have some questions that we can kind of go through, and we'll see what we come up with there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass things, or quickly, a couple big news items here. Since we had our last meetup, React has introduced a new RFC process. It's all done through GitHub, which is pretty cool, and anyone can submit RFCs for new ideas for React. So that's kind of a new way that they're getting the community involved in some of the stuff they're doing with their framework. They're basing it off the RFC process of some other projects. And so if you're interested in contributing to React, that's a great way to get involved, either just by commenting on some of the RFCs, or actually you can do a pull request to send one yourself too, which is pretty cool. Jest had a couple significant updates, mostly around performance and running things asynchronously. So if you want your tests to go quickly, that's nice. V8, a new version rolled out, and the big thing that I saw in it was some better support for regular expressions. So there's some global flags that weren't supported before. There's also named captures, where you can basically like name chunks of the regular expression to match. If you're a regular expression nerd, it's pretty cool that that's there now, because it'll be coming to Node and Chrome and things soon. And also Angular had a 5.1 release, which I think was mostly related to their CLI. I don't think it was a big release for the actual framework itself, and their material package hit 1.0, I think. So, any other releases that I didn't catch here? All right. You can catch up on all our videos on YouTube, and I think we're caught up to November now, so check those out if you haven't. We're always looking for more speakers and talks, so if you have anything you'd like to talk about, or any ideas for things you would like us to talk about, let us know. And jobs, I actually was going to list all the jobs here, but we actually had about 5 or 6 jobs in the last month or so. So if you hit exchange.com/jobs, we have a ton of job postings there right now. Please, I encourage you to check them out. It's a great way to find work to do in Edmonton. And with that, I will cut over to Casey, who will be doing our first talk. All right, I'm not totally sure how this is going to go, as I put a lot of these together in the last day or so, but hopefully we'll be able to have an interesting discussion about security, and if not, we can always segue to prototyping. So the biggest reason why security kind of came up is obviously over the last day or so, Intel, and then like now it seems like everybody's having a bit of a meltdown about some of these vulnerabilities right now. And actually, I just saw about 4 hours ago, Mozilla posted that they have actually been able to replicate some of the exploits in the browser. So they've released a patch that fixes it. Yeah, they have there's a shared array buffer, and I guess exploiting some timing issues with that, you can access memory from other origins that you're not supposed to be able to. So anyway, just stuff like that, it made me kind of think that I never think about security, or not very much, at least when I'm writing my JavaScript code. So I thought a little bit of a discussion that might be timely. So I thought a great way to kind of just start it off is security is one of those things where everyone's like, oh, it's very important, and yes, we have security, we're secure, but it's one of those things that's fairly abstract too. And I think, when you actually look at what security is and what it means to different apps and things like that, it can vary a lot. So I thought I would just start the discussion by asking people, when you're talking about security and writing a secure JavaScript app, what are you talking about? I see, Amelia, you've got to answer.
You on? Good? I don't know.
I can't tell. Sorry. Is it glowing? If it's glowing, it's on.
It's going. We're good. Okay. I think one thing that tends to get overlooked with security is there's the complex technological side, and then there's all the other ways that you can lose security. So this kernel bug has been getting a lot of talk the past couple days, and for any of you who haven't actually read the details, it goes in this complex system where it can read 1 byte at a time and then measure based on how fast some value is getting read back from memory, and is it faster than something else, and that one was cached, and it's hugely complicated and hugely painstaking, and I'm sure it is a real issue in some very, very specific cases. But there was another security bug that I saw a couple things about, and it was how ads in your browser can have hidden forms, and your browser autocomplete or password manager will autocomplete your personal data without you being even aware, and then the JavaScript can just read back the current input values and send it to a server. And I personally think that's a much bigger security risk as for how many people would likely to be affected by it and how easy it is for an attacker to run it up. It's not the sort of stuff that gets the real security nerds going crazy for these, oh my god, your basic chips have an error in, but it's a practical security risk. The big security risks aren't always the complex technological ones, and I think that's always something we need to keep in mind. You can patch all the tiny holes, but meanwhile have a unlocked window over there, and people coming in and going.
I think, Sean, you were first though, right?
Yeah, I think another aspect to keep in mind is, especially as our JavaScript applications get heavier and heavier, we're beginning to basically be indistinguishable from desktop applications, like more of a server-client world. And you need to assume that all of your clients, like your web applications, are hostile actors. The less trust you can have between your server and your client, and even within your server and your different architecture pieces, you're going to be unlikely able to predict the next big meltdown that comes down. But if you're designing your systems in a way that they're paranoid and you don't have this internal inherent trust, then when something happens, you're likely to be less affected by it. And it also just, I think, often promotes good programming practices. So your systems don't need to all know about each other. You can isolate things like that as well.
Right. I just kind of wanted to add, I totally agree with you that, all this low-level stuff is not really something that, a web developer is gonna need to think about, right? I'm gonna make an analogy, if you're working with AWS, for example, right? They basically they're running the platform, right? They're kind of the social contract there is they're responsible for security of the cloud. You're responsible for security in the cloud. Well, Mozilla is responsible for security of the browser. And you're responsible for security in your application running, and so look into the OWASP top 10 and all the good best practices of the stuff you're actually working with, rather than being paranoid about the corner case stuff that could happen on the platform is really the way to go, I think.
Okay, first of all, I'll buy if we do go for drinks. I'll buy a beer for anyone who can come up to me and give me the correct answer for what CORS is, what trust models it depends on, and who it's intended to protect from who. So free beer if anyone can give me a correct answer to that. I think one of the things that, first of all, what is secure? We have what is security, but I think another really interesting question is what is secure? And the idea of secure is it's what's perfect. It's unachievable. Nothing is ever secure. And back to Amelia's point, you look at this the processor exploit, and it's such an extreme exploit. I guarantee every one of us and all our applications have massively larger vulnerabilities. So much of security actually becomes a function of how visible and valuable are you to attack. Right. There's a dynamic of kind of being effectively secure just if no one cares about anything that you have to come after. And as soon as you become something that's valuable for other people to come after, you become significantly less secure. And that's why you can find this incredibly hard, incredibly nuanced exploit in an Intel chip. But how many Intel chips are out there? So what systems are running Intel chips? I'm sure Department of Defense systems are running Intel chips. There's probably systems controlling nuclear launches that are running on Intel chips. So just the exposure increases massively, and it totally changes the equation. So when I think about security, one of the things I try and think about are kind of almost in medieval forts with different layers of walls, and thinking about what are those walls and what are the consequences for different levels of those walls getting breached. So, for example, one of the fundamental things is I try and make it so that if my code base gets gets exposed. Somehow someone gets access to my code through, a security issue in the CI tooling I'm using, through a security issue in GitHub, from an disgruntled employee, whatever it is, that my code base should be able to get exposed. But in no way should that allow people to get access to my customers' data. So that's like things like making sure you don't have access keys, in your code base. So like thinking about, okay, like here's one trench, which is my code base, and making sure that if that domino falls, that you have another wall, and that you're deliberate in thinking about, what are the things that are important, and making sure that those, are not going to be exposed by these domino effects. Like this is a great example where Twitter got, hacked, I don't know even how long ago, 7 or 8 years ago. Like everything came out, like board meeting minutes came out, allergy list for employees came out, all this. And it was like a really like straightforward social attack vector on one employee's email account. But there's just this domino effect where like each domino took a little bit of effort, but by breaking down that first wall, like everything else cascaded. And I think that's often what's like thought about less, is the fact that different parts of your systems require different degrees of security depending on what the consequences of that wall being breached are. And thinking about those in different layers, instead of trying to say like I'm going to make my entire system secure. Well, you're never going to do that. But if you focus on the important things and make sure that again, a breach in your outer wall isn't going to all of a sudden cascade all the way back through your system is a more useful way to think of it. Anyways, that's a big rant.
That's good.
So that's the only thing I can add too. Like I don't really know much about the security. I read about it. Like I use JWT tokens, and then thought I was secure, and all of a sudden I wasn't anymore. So, like Ben said, always. What I do is like I make sure that I only send data that is necessary to be computed on, or to look for stuff on the back end. I don't send everything. That's all I know about security.
I think Ben brought up a really good point, which is you have to think about who's being protected from who, or who is vulnerable to who, I guess. And so there was a really interesting thing, I think, where a PHP developer had discovered a vulnerability in WordPress that could have allowed a massive, what's it called? I'm getting tired now. DDoS attack. So in a sense, the vulnerable party wasn't even WordPress itself, it was the entirety of the internet, because if every WordPress site had been exploited, it could have been used to basically bring down everything. So I guess maybe the first question about security is, who are you trying to protect? It's not always just your internal organization, it can also be the users. If you if you run an ad network and you give people bad ads, then their information can be stolen that way. So,
all right, why don't we move on to the next talking point then? I know one of the things that comes up a lot with security is, a lot of it is just keeping up to date on what's happening and like informed about what the security issues are in a timely manner. So one of the things I was wondering is, how do people do that? Like, where do you look? Do you just kind of assume it will show up somewhere on like Hacker News or something? Or I mean, that's usually, I guess, where I get it, but
I cheat. I crowdsource this through actually there's a local group that started up over the past year or so, YegSec. They have a Slack group and a website, yegsec.ca. I'm not trying to promote them or anything, but they are really cool, and they're a bunch of really smart people who are well connected, and they know all the Twitter accounts to follow and all this and that, and I just watch the channel, and I know the important stuff is going to get discussed there.
Yeah. What is it called? Sorry,
YegSec.
YegSec. Okay. Yeah. YGSEC. Cool. Yeah.
Sure. Do any of the, for example, unit testing, do they like incorporate any security issues into their testing? Like, is that something that they do?
So one easy thing you can do with unit testing is so I recently added this to my application because I don't really care about security when I'm prototyping. So I added a user system after, and one of the things is being able to edit or add stuff in your database and making sure the user is logged in. So you can add that maybe to your unit test or some sort of test.
I know one of the things you can do is like fuzz testing is called, where you basically throw random garbage at all of the inputs you can find in your system, and make sure that it doesn't have. Well, I don't know. It's more for like things where you might have buffer overflows and stuff like that, but there can be other problems too with script injection.
And one of the strategies, I used to be in security about 10 years ago, and one of the strategies that we use, and even with some of the products that we create, what I do is I proxy all our applications through. So I actually want to see at the HTTP level, HTTPC level, what is actually doing, and then trying to exploit those APIs or the application level with cookies. So there's a lot of tools out there that are open source that lets you proxy and then be able to modify the packets going in and out from your application, from your client side to the APIs. So that's one tip for developers that might not be too familiar with the security as well. It kind of teaches them. A lot of developers don't really understand cores or all these kind of things in there, so that kind of gives them a good way of understanding how the communication protocols work.
Would HTTPS help with stuff like that? Like, would it block those kind of attacks more, or?
It won't block it. You could proxy HTTPS just by installing a certificate, so it's quite easy.
Would you look at each individual package to?
So basically, what you do is what I typically do is I put the client and then I put a proxy between, and then I actually stop every request in and out. So I don't let it go right through. So it's not transparent. So the request comes in from the client, whatever it's doing, then I look at it and then I try to export it that way. So I'm not too worried about that, like the client side of things, and then I try it from the client side. So okay, so it's from the client side, I'm trying it from the API and the packet level. So the sort of strategy that I use, right? So I stop everything coming in and out. So for instance, some applications, some clients might request like licensing, right? So some applications require to query a licensing server and it gives back a cookie or something, where you're able to capture that on the way back in, change it, and make it fit like it's actually registered or not.
So you have like a lookup table that says, okay, if that whatever comes in, you have to pick from, like when you proxy, you look at you look at this table and you say, okay, this is what you have to do now.
Well, there's a lot of typical SQL injection stuff. There's a lot of typical security stuff that you just try. But like I said, I would just look at the request coming in and modifying whatever the type of request it is.
I know actually the Rails guides have like a section on security, on like the whole part on like using cookies and like basically even taking a cookie and like duplicating it to like another session or something like that, or invalidating them.
Just on the side notes, like even defining an application. Right? So you're like, why isn't this working? And it's just something very simple.
Right.
So I recommend a lot of developers using proxy to see what's going on behind the scenes. Right? Pairs, now that I remember, is Pairs, PARS. Proxy is an open source tool, it's part of the swap. They have a bunch of different tools, different tools that do classic testing and automation testing and applying proxy to.
So I'm not super familiar with what exists in this space for JavaScript in particular, but commonly in the security toolkit, kind of along the lines of testing, you'd want this in your testing pipeline, but it's not really a unit testing thing, would be static code analysis, looking for patterns that are likely to be suspect, just through static code analysis. So a quick Google search suggests JS Prime is a popular one right now.
This is a bit of a tangent, maybe coming back to the keep me updated and more so on the informed, is I think on OneNote it's important to keep updated, like what are the vulnerabilities that are coming out. But it's like almost reliably, these vulnerabilities will take advantage of very common patterns. So staying informed on the foundational security concerns and concepts can help you a lot if you get hit by something, because you can understand why this is working, how this is working. Like the recent CPU errors is just a fancy timing attack, which is valid over an HTTP network just as well as it is on a CPU. So kind of keeping some of the theory in mind, I think, can also really, really help when an issue comes around, just figuring out how to handle it.
Right.
I think just looking at basic security standards, I think if you got that covered in your application, most attackers, they'll try quickly, they'll automate these things, and if they can't get through, they'll just move on to the next one. So if you kind of covered you've probably covered 80% of your attacks just by fall inside.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to mention, I thought you were going to. We started using a tool called Gemnasium, 3 months ago, 4 months ago? And it's connected to our GitHub repo. So every time we land an update to our code base, actually, I don't even know how frequently it checks. But anyways, it checks all the libraries. And it works for Ruby on Gems, but also works for JavaScript projects as well, I believe.
Checks for known CVEs and libraries, so if there's a known issue with the library. And on Ruby in some languages, maybe Java too, it'll actually do the static code analysis that you were talking about. So it'll be like, you have a JSS cross-site scripting attack available here because of the way your code is structured.
Yeah, and then it'll send you email updates. So like if it finds new security exploits that are in libraries in your system, it'll send you those updates. It'll tell you which versions you need to update to fix those issues. So that's pretty helpful. And then like I think the other thing like on keeping informed is just doing your diligence to understand the things like cores. I mentioned because it's one of these ones that I think almost no web developers actually understand who it's supposed to be protecting from who, and like sometimes it gets very pedantic where I've seen people getting really upset about cores, but if you look at the use case, cores doesn't matter at all there. So they're like getting all upset about something that's not actually providing any security. So just actually like instead of just reading the Stack Overflow post and like pasting that setting into your Apache server or whatever it's telling you to do, you know, take the time and actually understand like what's going on, like why that's there and the ideas behind it. Will go a long ways because like a lot of the time Stack Overflow, yeah, that solution is going to get your app working, but you might have just removed all the security that was actually there to provide. So.
Right.
So one thing I think there was New Year's. There was talking about what are you looking forward into the new year? What are the problems you see in the world? On CBC, they had a cybersecurity guy who was talking about how with Bitcoin, with all the money that Bitcoin's worth nowadays, and it's been kind of the money that the criminals have been using. We may have some now very well-resourced hackers out there. That might be an issue worth mentioning. It's not like they're not already well-resourced anyway. So is JavaScript a bit of a... I have no idea. Is JavaScript kind of a soft target? Because it looks like it might be to me. You're kind of at an intersection of a number of different browsers and using a whole bunch of different tools. It's a dynamically typed language.
Well, yeah, not been around 2014, 15. Everything was like a moving target. Now it's like consolidating things slowly. There was so much out there. Like it took in my slides 2 slides about the JavaScript fatigue, and you're lucky you're getting into JavaScript now because now it's actually a lot better and it's consolidating a lot of the problems we had before with all the libraries.
I think one thing that's nice about, I guess not quite so true anymore, JavaScript traditionally has been a client-side library, which means you don't have the same. If you're doing your server properly, you assume all your clients are hostile anyways. So if your client is compromised, it's not as much of an issue. However, now you're seeing more and more server-side JavaScript, so that's problematic. Also, client-side problems, security problems can be an issue for your customer if things are leaking there. I think probably I don't think JavaScript's any inherently more or less secure than anything else. One of the things that is problematic with any programming language is that Ben mentioned is taking code that you might not understand. Like grab something from Stack Overflow, just makes it work. Grab an NPM module, which looks nice and easy. And these things could have problems because anytime you're coding a system that you don't understand, there could be potential problems coming from there.
Yeah, and I think too, like in terms of the quality of the actual code, you know, things like browsers have had a lot of money and like time invested in making them pretty secure. You know, you look at something like V8 and you know, the amount of money that Google would have put into that is pretty considerable. And you know, a lot of them, like there's been things where there's bug bounties every year or like contests where you go and try to hack the browsers and they reward pretty significant prizes for doing that. So I mean, I think as an environment, there's definitely, you know, a lot of potential there for issues, you know, because you are basically getting code from someone else's server and running it on your machine. But, you know, at the same time, I think a lot of people have recognized that, and there has been a lot of work to make sure that when you're running it, it is pretty sandboxed and secured as much as you can, you know.
I think, oh.
When when you're talking about the security of JavaScript or just in general, it's important to talk about security for whom, from whom. So, certainly as far as the end user running code in their browser, that's much more secure than downloading an app. Or especially much more secure than downloading an old Windows desktop application, which had so much low-level things. The browser is a sandbox. The browser is designed to protect the user from bad website code. Is it perfect? No. I mean, the browser developers are always worried about vulnerabilities. Certainly, from the end user of just install our software versus go to our website. Go to our website. So it's protected from the user side.
Yeah.
What it's because it is a distributed system, because it is a client-server system.
When it's
the developer, there's all sorts of complications of doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting too. I think you've seen browsers' posture to security change a bit too. Like for a long time, it was like, let's add features that bring us to parity with the desktop. And I still think that that is something that a lot of browsers are trying to do. But you certainly see, like, as they go through RFC, and even for features that are out there now, they definitely pause a lot more to consider security. And things like fingerprinting and stuff, like where you can go and look at the configuration that someone has for their browser, and without using cookies or anything like that, still kind of track them in like incognito windows and between sessions. Browsers have taken steps to change. Like there was a Power API that practically no one used. Like they were looking at usage statistics, and basically the only people that were using it were people that were using it for like ad network tracking and stuff like that. So like things like that, it's interesting. They've actually changed the features in the browser and how they implement them to obfuscate and like improve security. So it's good to see the browsers are doing more of that these days.
Yeah, I think like there's always that aspect too of just the fact that browsers are very cognizant of the fact that there's arbitrary code executing inside of them. So like you used to always see, you don't hear about as many of these, but of course like viruses used to always come in through like what, like Outlook was horrible, right? Like how many different viruses exploited buffer overflows in Outlook? Just around images, MP3 files. So there are all these like applications that took in external data, usually in the form of some static binary file. And because they weren't thinking about the fact that, there's arbitrary code that can run inside my system, they weren't really hardening against it. Whereas at least in a browser, it's so obvious that you're doing it that they're very aware of those risks. And because of that, always looking for those and trying to protect against them. I think actually probably the biggest risk is just the control the user has over that environment. So the extensions they install, the malware they have. Like we had a JavaScript error logger, and we had to turn it off for anything that wasn't from our domain, just because we got such a flood of like malware and tracking and like bugs from all this malicious code running on user systems. Like and there's just so much noise that we had to turn it off. But it tells us that these users have all this malicious stuff that they've installed onto their system. So
on the pages that you're just casually browsing, is that right?
well, on our pages, but things that are either installed in their system or that they've installed as extensions or malware or whatever that's gone onto their system, but is JavaScript that's running when our page is run.
Why don't we kind of move on in topics? I know one of the things that's kind of you have to write for a lot of apps is how you do your authentication and your authorization in the browser. And I know that sometimes that can go security. Sean looks ready to talk right away. All right.
I was just going to say, you should never, ever, ever write your own authorization engine. Because you are not going to know half as much of it as someone who's written a well-versed library.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself doing that, maybe stop that, think about your life at this point.
I'd say the same about trusting anything on the browser side, period. But that's just my extreme opinion.
To extend from what Sean just said about never write your own, even if you do write your own, you also have to worry about, are you the only developer working this code? Is there other people? We currently are trying to get rid of it and have kind of our own half-baked authentication, and then we also started doing page caching at some point, which we did properly when we implemented it. And then we added some feature and changed some settings in it, and added another feature and changed some settings, and added a new page where users can log in. And we're caching the full page response, so suddenly some users are logged in as other people. Logging in.
Yeah.
Luckily, we didn't have any sensitive information in our site, just like email addresses, and it was kind of a limited thing. We resolved it as soon as we could, but it speaks to the point of writing your own auth mechanism. It's generally just a very bad idea. Use something done by people that know what they're doing and don't mess with it.
Right. Yeah. No, I've actually had that same experience a long time ago. It's not fun. Actually, one thing I just saw a couple weeks ago, I think it was right before Christmas, they were talking about like new APIs that were coming to the browser. And right now, this is one of those ones that's like Chrome is really pushing, and they're pushing it as a standard, but it's still like a Chrome thing. But they were looking at, like, right now you think of security and signing in, it's passwords and maybe like some kind of two-factor authentication. And so they were working on an API for adding like other vectors of authentication. So you could use like one of those little Ubi keys, or I can't remember what they're called, but like those keys the bank gives you to put in and stuff, and like other kind of, working with a fingerprint reader if your computer has one and stuff like that to log people in and exposing that stuff through the browser, which was kind of cool. So, I mean, even stuff like that, like, I don't know, I realize passwords are going to be around for a long time, but like there's so many ways that like passwords are a really bad solution for like authenticating people. And, like I just find like, for me even, I have to use a password manager. Like you have to worry so much about like a password being compromised on like that one site and then being used on everything that you have to assume that you have to have different passwords on everything. And there's so many websites you sign up for that you basically have to assume that you have to have something managing it because you won't remember them.
I'm a huge fan of OAuth for that exact reason. Why force your users to have another username and password when they can use something that's trusted, has a lot of engineering like Google and Facebook.
Yep. Well, you don't have to worry about someone stealing your passwords.
For Feathers, for example, I don't know how secure it is, but Feathers does this before and after hook. And every time you request something from the server, it has to go through an authentication process and then checks if there's a token on your server stored. And the same thing goes for the browser. It checks first for the stored token in the browser until it shows you anything. I'm not sure how secure that is. It works for me right now. I don't know.
Well, like even like a token
solution
over SS or HTTPS or something like that can be a pretty good solution for starting. If you have an app where you just need to get some kind of authorized authentication in there to start. It's better than like a username and password that you share with the whole team or something.
Well, is there anything that doesn't store anything in the browser?
What do you mean? Like,
well, you have to have something to authenticate against. So
like a
how do you
cookie
do
or
that without any information?
I don't know.
One of the things that's becoming interesting is just alternative models to these types of questions that are starting to emerge. So like Slack does its magic link thing where it sends a link to your email. From that link in your email, you can get access to the app without ever having to use a password. It's very similar to using an OAuth concept, where basically it's relying on the security of your email instead of it having to own it itself. The other thing I think is really interesting and kind of goes back to the similar idea that I was talking about earlier about kind of like these degrading walls of levels of security that I really like is like GitHub does this. I know LinkedIn does this where there's kind of different degrees of authentication. So, you can access certain things even though your session might be, a few days old, but when you go to do something that's like an admin style action, it will ask you to re-authenticate. So those types of ideas I think are really interesting. And it's really neat to see like finally some experimentation and new models of authentication emerging. But of course, like the trick again always goes back to if you're going to do something that, isn't the traditional, username, password encrypted in your database, whatever you're using, whether it's OpenID, OAuth, fingerprint reader, again, make sure you understand it.
before you start going down that path, because like a great example was the secure URL thing, which is basically a security through obscurity, right? I'm gonna send someone this link that's gonna have this like randomly generated 64 character long string that no one could ever guess, and therefore it's secure. And then people were taking those URLs and putting them in URL shortener, that had like 5 characters. So it's like, well, you've just removed 59 characters worth of security from that link. So like, again, understanding if you're going to do something that's a more novel approach, just making sure that you're understanding where the security is, and making sure that you're not accidentally removing that security.
Right. Just a general comment that I think a fingerprint is more akin to a username than it is to a password. Right.
On the different strategies for security that have been popping up, one that I just saw recently that I hadn't seen before, but apparently has been around for a little while, is WhatsApp has a web client that you can use. So if you don't want to be on your phone at work or anything like that, and it's a QR code that is on your computer screen that you just hold the WhatsApp application to, and then your phone handles sending it in, and then suddenly your session is valid on your computer.
Interesting. Signal did something like that too, I think, with getting data back. That's cool though.
I've seen it the other way, but I've never seen it. Like I've
Yeah.
seen there's a QR code on your screen, and you capture that section on the app. But doing it the opposite way, that's actually really interesting.
It's pretty slick too, because it's seamless when it's just like you're showing the QR code and then you just hold up the phone and then it suddenly you're in the conversations and stuff.
I still wish like QR codes were more ubiquitous. Like it's so funny. Like I wish all the camera apps would just be like, oh, there's a QR code. What can I do?
I think authentication is sort of become more of a standard. And
I've heard of issues though with two-factor authentication, like especially over text. I know Google said that they had some like higher kind of value target accounts that people were like phoning the phone company and basically like saying like, I had problems with my phone, I need you to change it over to like a new phone basically and get the text messages.
They're going to get like your code to be secure, your server to be secure.
Yeah.
But they could just call the main person and say, hey, I need to go fix something in the office.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's an overall thing. But I think somebody mentioned that if you have high value information, they're going to figure out a way to do it really well.
Right.
I think the flip side to keep in mind too with two-factor authentication is just like in terms of any like system reliability is you're adding another dependency. So Amazon only supports physical MFA devices from Gimbal. I forget the name of the company, but they're pieces of junk. And if you're like basically like our God access, which we only use in extreme situations, was locked down by one of those cards, and the card just died like after basically no usage, being kept in like a perfectly controlled environment, just because it's a piece of junk. And then to get access to your Amazon account is a drawn out process that they don't talk about what that looks like. So like if you needed to get in and your MFA card's broken, like you could be in a really bad situation. And like similarly, I had one with Google using text message 2FA, where they were clearly having issues because I just didn't get the text message. And then like 45 minutes later, it finally showed up, and then it repeated me to send me the same text message every half hour for like the next 7 hours, like through the night, all through the night. I kept on getting this stupid text message. So like that's just the flip side of it too. Like if you do start adding these additional required authentication mechanisms, is balancing that. Like if the security of your app isn't that mission critical, it might not be worth the user experience risks.
Right. It just depends. Like if your app is like you're not really having private information, it doesn't really matter. Right. But if you're protecting your whole infrastructure and Amazon servers, then I get what you're saying.
One of the ones I saw that I haven't actually seen in practice yet, but they were talking about it was having like a sound that your computer would emit, and it would like wake up your phone, and then your phone would like echo no on its back basically, so that it knew it was you. Which is like, I think that like if that happened to me, I'd be like, what just happened? Like, how did the computer know I was here? But
that's how the Chromecast authenticates the TV.
is it really? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. Huh. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. All right. How are you guys doing? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to go have beers? Like, beer. Okay.
right, well, why don't we wrap this up? I've got a couple. I made like 10 slides, so there's like encryption and content injection and XSS and all that kind of stuff, and that's why like that password manager example. That was the big thing. Is like it would only be a problem if you had like hostile ads or like had stuff that you hadn't sandboxed properly, or else if you like wrote the whole website and like just wanted to steal people's passwords. But yeah, like that was one where like doing some proper like protection from cross-site scripting and stuff could definitely save you, but it also shows like the value of doing that and not having like ads or something like that, or even like the extensions you were talking about. You know, some of those extensions in the Chrome store they found were mining Bitcoin or whatever it was, Litecoin or something like that. You know, there's certainly no reason that they couldn't be waiting for you to go to your banking website and then inject that form silently to get the password and send it back. So even like I've always been a bit cautious about installing extensions from the Chrome store because you look at them and they inject scripts in like every site you go to. So like you just have to have one of those, like Pinterest or something gets like hacked and a million people's banking passwords. Hmm. Mm.
They were common typos in the module, so I did like a deeds or something. You install, it looked like you installed the module, but it was actually the explicit libraries. So it's very, very
Sneaky.
simple.
Huh. I saw a thing. It was I think the New York Times was cautioning some of like journalists and stuff that they'd seen sites that were using non-visible characters to watermark text as a way to like figure out like if you were on a network, they would go and let's say use a proxy or something to inject it into the content on sites that you're going to, and then if it was pasted in like an email or something, it would still come through, but you wouldn't see anything. But then they could go back and like in a court thing and say, oh yeah, and this was cut and paste by this person. So. There's lots of weird stuff like that. Yeah, other slides, tools. I don't know. We talked a bit about Gymnasium. Code Climate was another one that kind of came up there. Were there any other tools that people were using against their code bases?
Metasploit. It's called Metasploit. It's like a big platform that has all the vulnerabilities that exist. They basically put them out there and then you can kind of use it. Metasploit. That's a big one.
This way?
Yeah.
These scare me because they look like they make everything so automated and stuff too. I'm just like,
they don't just look like it; they do.
They do, yeah.
It's like two.
Oh, speaking of darknet, the onion principle for board, like when
This talks about all sorts of different tools.
yeah, so it's like this onion principle, I can run into it from onion to onion, and it's very inefficient, but it helps. I would never use it as a real, like, for real websites.
Well, Tori, you just gotta like. You're basically trusting whoever's at the end of the chain, right? Because like, yeah, you're encrypted between each hop, but at the end of the chain, at the endpoint, when it goes out to your destination, right? So who runs the endpoints though, right? Like there's a lot of open questions there.
One thing I was just gonna say is kind of taking license with the idea of tool is like if it's a big enough project you can afford it, like a third party audit's a great idea. Like third parties they're coming in with fresh eyes. They don't have kind of like a vested interest in glazing over things, so they can definitely catch things and just leveraging people whose full-time job it is to understand what these exploits. Hilarious one that's come up a few times in the news actually was the S3 one. Have you guys heard about the S3 bucket permissions? Okay, everyone should go home and check your S3 bucket permissions. S3 has a permission that you can set on your bucket that says authorized users only. Now you would think that means authorized users on your account, but it means any authenticated AWS user, period. So anyone can create a free AWS user and then they're an authorized user and get access to your bucket. The NSA had a bucket that got exposed that way. There was another big one with the US government that just happened to. So it's really cool. Anyway, I just remembered that.
At Investopedia, we had a BI system that was being set up. It was kind of like ad hoc, like getting it set up, and they hadn't moved it to like an official infrastructure yet.
And one day, all our S3 data was replaced with a file that said secure your S3 buckets.
Oh, jeez. Oh, fun. I know one thing that's cheap and easy too, but is easy to like not do is code reviews. But just having like code reviews, the project I'm on right now, I'm doing a lot of code reviews with people and like getting my code reviewed a lot, and it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of like solo coding for the last 3-4 years, and it's just funny like having someone else look at your code. I find I definitely code more defensively like doing that, but you know just having someone else look at it, they'll see things that you don't. A fresh pair of eyes, like you say.
Just a quick note on the Amazon thing. Amazon released a new service that basically monitors your home infrastructure, and it does things like the bucket permission, and it does like your application security. So basically, it's a layer, and they're watching everything on your layer level, and then they're kind of giving you alerts like, hey, the server is connecting to a Tor network, or hey, one of our servers was we had a couch TV database, and somebody installed a Bitcoin miner on it. So things like that. So it's a free service for up to a couple thousand records. So it might be a good one if you have an Amazon just to kind of do initial
check that out.
Check.
Cool. All right. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? We'll wrap this up for the night. Just quick thank yous. There's a lot of people that make this happen. First off, our sponsors, Jobber and Investopedia, they have both been really great supporters of the meetup, and we definitely appreciate it. So thank you very much to both of you guys.
Has anyone heard of Gatsby so far? Have you used it?
We tried it a bit, but probably won't work for us because we have like 500,000 pages. It'll take days to generate.
Does anyone? So
it looks awesome.
It is great.
What is this called? It's called
Gatsby.
Gatsby, like the writer?
React front end.
Generates static pages.
And you can like use GraphQL and everything.
Yeah. It is super slick. I was actually talking to one of the developers on it. They're working on a startup to handle a like CI server that would handle generating for a lot more pages. And like what do you call it? Like incremental building. So if you made a change to the code, it only rebuilds the pages it needs to.
Cool.
So this could be talk. Gatsby would be interesting.
And so it uses React components and stuff like that on the back end. Cool. Interesting. Yeah, that would be a good talk.
I can probably coerce someone into doing that one.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll follow up with you guys.
Which one to Gatsby? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. So thank you to Jobber and Investopedia. Thank you to Startup Edmonton for providing the space and the Wi-Fi. And reminder, next meetup, February 1st. Speakers and demos wanted. Follow us wherever you follow people. And drinks. Oh, thanks, guys. Exchange.js is Edmonton's JavaScript meetup. Thanks to our sponsors, Jobber and Investopedia. Support the meetup and like and share this video. And stay informed by following us on Twitter and meetup.com. Links in the description. See you soon!